Hello and welcome to another Cuppa with Kaci, and today we are using my new art book, sketchbook thingamajig, and we're going to do a fun video that I've been planning for a while. So without further ado, let's get to it. So a couple weeks back, the Aldi that is local to me had these alcohol markers in for, I think it was like $9.99 for a pack of 12. So I thought I'd grab a pack and compare them to my Copics. So let's get swatching them, and then we can pick out equivalent colours from my Copic collection. And I went with the pastel pack. They had a few different packs, but I went with the pastel pack because I thought it would be easier to create better artwork with pastel colours because I can layer them better than if they're all really bright. I mean, not quite sure how this one right here is supposed to be pastel, but also my new sketchbook is the Ohuhu square marker sketchbook. Let me just check. Yeah, I don't have another side. So I'll link it below, but it's the Ohuhu marker specific paper and stuff, and yeah, I haven't been using it long, so there's not a whole lot in it yet. So these have a chisel tip and a bullet nib, and they are triangular, and yeah. So I started by swatching all the colours, which, as you can see, they're not very pastel. I mean, a couple of them were, but for the most part, they weren't very pastel at all. So I knew that I was going to have a little bit of trouble with the layering, but at the same time, that made me think that if I had gone with one of the other two packs that they had, which I believe were a greys pack and a brights pack, then I definitely would have had difficulty with layering because the pastel packet is just so saturated. I mean, I think there's maybe 4 actual pastel colours in this, the rest are very bright. I mean, they're all nice colours, except for there's like a, I mean, even the kind of poopy green's a nice colour if you're into that kind of thing. So I guess, yeah. And then after swatching them, I tried some blending tests between the pastel pink and the pastel yellow there, just to see how well they blend together and how I could get a good gradient. And then I went straight into colour matching with my Copics collection. So I found near matches for almost all of them, and perfect matches for a couple, so I was pretty happy with what I got in the end. I don't end up even using all the colours, so I didn't have to match all of them, but I wanted to make sure that I had them there in case I did need to use them through the picture that I ended up drawing. And you can see a couple of times I switched between 2 different sheets of swatches there for my Copics. It's because my lovely fiance gave me his collection of Copic markers for Valentine's Day this year, so I had them swatched out on a separate piece of paper and with a little dot on the ones that I already had so I could see my duplicates and stuff. So where I didn't have a colour that matched well enough, I would go to his ones and see if there was one that was better suited, which did help me out with a couple of them. I think the bright pink one is from the collection he gave me. And in a sec you'll see I have a bit of trouble deciding between 2 purples. One's slightly too light and one was slightly too dark, but I ended up going with the darker one because I already had a lighter purple, so I thought having the darker purple would give it a little bit more contrast with the final image. And back to past Kaci. Let's try a fade out between this pink and this yellow, and I feel like I should probably use the chisel tip just so it's the same, but I've already started with the brush tip now, so we'll yeah, no, looks pretty similar. I mean, obviously I used the chisel tip, so let's just, for the sake of argument, use the chisel tip instead of the brush nib, because that's gonna give it a different look as well. There we go. So you can see there is so that's the code of place, and that's Copics. Now we need to draw up an image to use to test the difference. And we'll do 2 copies of it, and we'll put it on this page, and we will test the colours to get in the same places. So I will be back talking to you in future Kaci. And this is where I talk to you on voiceover for the rest of the video. Yay! At first I had no idea what I wanted to draw. I probably should have thought about that before I started the video. But I didn't, I just jumped right in and I thought, let's wing it. So the first sketch is just me sort of warming up how I do every time. 3/4 view of a girl's face with the same haircut as I always do. And then I was like, okay, that's done now to actually try and design a character to use these colours for. So what I did is I looked at the colours and tried to draw something I think would look good in pastels instead of drawing a character and then trying to make the pastels work with it, if you know what I mean. So I deliberately chose elements I thought the colours would work for instead of the other way around, making the colours work for the picture. So I went with this little cat hat. I've seen them on the internet a lot and I thought, hell, why not? I don't have one, and I've wanted one for a while, and I mean, I'm never going to get one, but they're so cute, and I thought I might as well draw one since I'm never going to own one. So I did that, and then I did this sort of off-the-shoulder sweater thing, which was alright, and then I was like, I have no idea what to do for bottoms at all. I did some little shorts. I was like, yeah, no, this isn't working for me, so I decided to just sort of focus on the hat itself, because the hat was the main thing I wanted to draw. So I decided to do a close-up of her face, and I thought, what better way to make this cute than to give her little star freckles and stuff. So that's how this little character was born. And after I did the sketch, I thought I'd do some colour practice to see where I wanted the different colours to go, and I had a lot of trouble with this because despite drawing the picture with the colours in mind, I didn't actually have any idea of where I wanted the specific colours to go. I mean, I had there's a one sort of pastel skin tone in there, which I was like, well, that's going to be the skin tone, that's easy. But it's like, I don't know what colour I want the hair to be, and I don't know what colour I want the hat to be. So I did a few little colour tests which get lazier each time. Like this one sort of took a little bit of effort to sketch and then line, and then the next one's I just used the pen straight out, and then the next one after that I just sort of scribbled the shapes just to try and pick where I wanted the different colours to go, because I could not decide. It was really hard, and even in the final picture I went with something that I hadn't even sketched out. So that's a big no-no. Don't just wing it. Think about things before you do them. That's all I have to say about that. Because I had a lot of trouble. I was like, oh, did I want the hat to be pink? Did I want the hair to be green? So I did I coloured over, did some layering, and then didn't like it. So as you can see, sketching out a very quick one with my liner instead of even bothering with sketching underneath. And it's horrendous. Don't look too closely, please. It's so bad. But yeah, I tried with a pink hat and green hair, and then I was like, I don't really like green hair, so I'll put some blue over it, try gradient, see if that works. And I realised after doing all this that I did the colour testing with my Copics when I really probably should have done it with the Creative Place markers, because those are the ones I'm making the video about, so I should have maybe done the colour testing with them to try and decide what colours I wanted the character to be with those ones, and then just colour match with the Copics, but oh well. And there's my beautiful third scribble, which, oh my gosh, took me the longest, and I just, don't do what I do, people. Actually think things through before you do them, because this is terrible. Yeah, and then we're going to skip forward a little bit to where I have redrawn the close-up. I don't know how well you can see that, because I left it in the pink Colour Erase pencil because I wanted to do the lines afterwards, mostly because with pastels, if I used a black liner or a dark coloured liner and it wasn't quite dry yet, and I did it over with the pastels, then it could smudge and then it would just ruin the whole thing. So I thought I'd leave the lines till last and focus on the colour. And I did my Copics first I was trying to be smart. I know how my Copics work really well, and I know how they blend and stuff, so I thought if I do all the colours with the Copics first, then I can copy the technique with the cheaper markers instead of going in blindly with the cheaper markers and then doing it with my Copics and be like, oh yeah, that's how I use these. Especially considering the cheaper markers didn't have a brush nib. So I went in with the Copic side of things first and did each colour separately. So I did the skin tone on the Copics, then I went onto the Creative Place markers and did the skin tone on that, and then I do the hair, and then I do the hair on the Creative Place, and so on and so forth. So another thing I found is trying to shade was difficult because the colours didn't really layer up very well, like not as much as I was hoping they would, so the shading's a bit lackluster, but I managed to get some cute blush and stuff at least. And then this is where I found that the skin tone colour in the Creative Place was a lot more saturated than I actually thought it was. I thought it was a lot paler because on the swatches it came out really pale, but then I tried actually colouring in this whole block of Skid Toad. It came out really saturated and orangey, and it was, you know, it was alright, but it was not nearly as soft and nice as the Copic marker one. But I kept on with it. I did some blush and did the fade out, which wasn't too hard. They were surprisingly juicy, I think is the best term I could use. Like, they weren't dry at all, so I found blending was rather easy with them, which is always good with the cheaper markers, because without a brush nib, blending can sometimes be difficult, but the fact that these were so juicy made it really easy to blend with them, which was nice. And I also decided that I wanted to use coloured line art for this, which is another reason why I did it last, because I wasn't 100% sure what colours I was going to use to different areas, so I didn't know what colour lines I wanted to use. But I made the dark pink I could say the black tone. I used that for the darkest tone on everything, so the dark pink for the eyelashes and the inside of the mouth instead of using black. Well, obviously I didn't have a black, so I kind of picked that there. Oh, and this is where I was trying to decide the hair colour. I went in and started to do it blue and then decided, no, I don't want to do it blue, I'm going to do it blonde. So on the Copic one there is a horrible line of blue along the left side of the fringe there, which I was hoping would blend out a bit nicer than it did, but it didn't. But this is a trick I used to use on my digital art a lot. I would shade blonde with pink instead of yellow or orange because it made it, I don't know, it made it pop a lot more, and I really liked how it looked, so that's what I did here. I decided to shade it with the pale pink and go over with the pale yellow, and then I did the same again, except I did it the opposite way around. I used the dark yellow for the darker shade and then used that darker pink not the darkest pink, but the slightly darker pink over the top of that to give it some dimension, and I'm really happy with how it came out actually, despite that horrible line of blue along the left hand there. And then surprisingly, the Creative Place ones, despite not having a brush nib, held out pretty well using this technique. So I used the bullet nib for most of this because I'm really bad with chisel nibs. I'm so clumsy and messy with them that it just always looks terrible. So I used the bullet nib, and I think actually this is the one time where I didn't. I used the chisel nib over the top of the pink just to blend it out nicer because it was such a big area to colour in. But yeah, for the most part I used the bullet nib for the details and things. And despite the technique I used for the hair holding out really well, it was a shame that the skin tone was so saturated because there wasn't much contrast between the yellows, which I didn't think about when I chose the colour for the Copic one because I didn't have the issue because the skin tone was quite pale. Then I came into the Creative Place markers one and it ended up looking very similar to the hair colour because it came out very yellowy orange. But it doesn't look too bad once I get the line on there at least. And this is where I found my blue Copic marker was running out of ink, so I need to refill that one. Oops. So it looks really patchy on the hat, but don't blame the Copic markers for that. That's my fault for not realising I had no ink in it whatsoever. And then the Creative Place blue, again, looks patchy. I don't know why. I'm not sure if it's just the way I coloured it or if the pen was a little drier than the others. But I had real trouble getting that one to look smooth. Maybe it's just because it was a darker colour, more saturated, so you could see the strokes more. Who knows? Either way, it wasn't that great of a smooth contrast, and the smooth spot of colour. Words. I also found that the blue was a lot different than it looked in the swatch as well when I did the hat, because it did not look nearly as close to the Copic blue as it did on the swatch, which was a shame. But it looks alright overall. In the end, I'm actually really happy with how both these pieces came out. And I had a lot of fun playing with the markers. I even used, as you can see, I brought in my colourless blender there. Obviously the Creative Place ones didn't come with a colourless blender, but I have a Copic one. And I thought, why not try the Creative Place markers with the colourless blender from the Copics. So I did that on the teeth because I wanted to shade the teeth so they weren't just plain white, but I didn't want it to be a hard line. So I used the pale lavender, I think it was called, purple, and did a tiny bit of shading and then faded it out with the colourless blender, and surprisingly worked really well. I mean, I know a colourless blender is mostly just plain alcohol in a pen, so of course it's going to work with other alcohol markers, but I was still pleasantly surprised, and I'm going to stay pleasantly surprised. Don't ruin my happy. And then we go in with the Freckles, and I get a white gel pen and I do highlights, which it worked well over the top of both my Copics and the Creative Place ones, so I was happy with that. I didn't expect it to not work because I know this brand of white gel pen works pretty well on most of my artwork, so I didn't think the Creative Place markers would have much of a difference. And I made the effort to put all the highlights in the same places and all the freckles in the same places as well, because I wanted it to look as uniform between the two pieces as possible. I mean, obviously you can see they're slightly different, just because it's very hard to do exactly the same drawings one right after the other, so they're as close as I could make them without photocopying or tracing, and I didn't want to do either of those things. And then I go in with my two pink Copic liners. So I've got an actual pink one, and then I think the other one's called Wine. So I used the wine around the eyelashes and the mouth where that dark pink was used, and then the pink around everything else. just because I didn't want to do black lines. I wanted it to look pastel, and I think if I put black lines on it, it would have just been too much, and I didn't want that. So I was a bit messy with the lines, to be honest. I think my hand was starting to cramp or something, and so I wasn't as neat with them as I could have been, but I never usually am when I do the line art last, except on a watercolour painting, because I usually do it with a brush. But whenever I do the the line art after everything else, it tends to be a bit messy, and I don't know why that is. It just is. So it's not bad. I find it kind of charming when it's a little bit sketchy with the line art, and that could just be me making an excuse to be lazy and not do it as well as I could. So do call me up on that if that's what you think it is. And then I labelled them Copics at the top, Creative Place at the bottom. I signed it, and that's the finished picture. So exciting news! I have reached 100 subscribers, so my next video will be a celebration video, and there may be a chance to win a free commission. So if you stay tuned for next week, you can find out all about that. Thanks for watching, and have an awesome week. Bye!